This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Sean Cole, and today we're here to check out the new Indycar by iRacing. And this is the new Indycar that will ultimately replace the old Dallara Indycar in the service starting next season. For now, it's coming out to be able to run it in this year's virtual Indy 500 coming up this coming weekend. And it's going to be really only in that configuration. Now before, I've seen a lot of videos online already, people doing hot laps, showing you driving videos. There are plenty of those to be seen. And obviously I'm going to show you some driving footage here today, but ultimately I want to give you a little bit of background on Dallara and on the DW12, which is the designation of this particular car. So let's start out with the history of Dallara. Dallara was founded by Gianpaolo Dallara, who was an aeronautical engineer that in the 60s worked for the greatest names in racing: Ferrari, Maserati, and Lamborghini. By 1969, he was doing design work for the Williams F1 team, and this led to him founding Dallara Automobili in 1972. Over the years, they have had their hand in hill climb cars, sports cars, and of course, open-wheeled cars. In 1983, Dallara produced its first F3 car, and by 1985 had been the most dominant name in that class of racing. They have been in and out of Formula One over the years with varying levels of success, and they are looking for a possible return to F1 next year with Haas Racing. In 1997, Dallara made its first Indycar and started winning championships right away. In 2003, Indycar went to a spec-type chassis, and nearly all of the field was made up of Dallara models. In fact, Dallara has been the championship-winning car in all but 3 years since Indycar's inception in 1996. The current Indycar chassis that is commonly referred to as the DW12 was an adjustment to safety improvements that Indycar and Dallara were looking to make following the death of Dan Wheldon in 2011 in a Las Vegas IndyCar race. The new car model would feature an IndyCar safety cell in an attempt to prevent future similar scenarios. The distinction of DW12 was in honor of Dan Wheldon and would be in the 2012 chassis for all teams moving forward. Now moving on to our simulated version of this race car. The Dallara DW12 is a carbon fiber Kevlar monocoque chassis with a stressed engine. This means the engine is actually an integral part of the overall suspension, and the rear actually hangs off of the motor itself. Visible in its design are some of the safety features incorporated into the DW12, like the covered rear wheels to prevent cars from launching off one another, as well as the raised sides of the car to protect the driver. Also visible and making the DW12 a unique race car are the bumper or Nerf bars on the rear end. Now the DW12 is a double A-arm pushrod suspension. Now what that means is each wheel has its own shock, and through a pushrod and a cam, it actually is within the housing of the vehicle, so you won't see it in the suspension. There's a third shock that allows you to adjust the pair of shocks front or rear collectively. It is a full aerodynamics car with both above and below air channeling going on. It uses a fixed main wing front and rear with adjustable secondary wings. The car weighs in at a hair over 1,500 pounds and has a turbocharged V6 engine producing anywhere from 550 to 700 horsepower depending on turbo boost. This is delivered to the ground via a 6-speed sequential transmission. In its road course configuration, the car will also feature a push-to-pass function like the real Indy cars have. So the car debuted on iRacing today to various different reactions. On one hand, you have the die-hard lovers of the old Dallara who've invested a lot of time into that setup for each season or for this big race coming up. And on the other hand, you have the people who are driving the new car who've been wanting to see the new car model and drive it, and they're talking about loving it, loving the driving experience, talking about how it's a completely different car to drive, not just a facelift and cosmetic changes alone. Now the car right now only comes in the Indy 500 configuration, so if you take it to a different oval or road course, you won't have the right downforce or grip levels. So it also raises another question. Did they get this car out just for the big race? Only 2 weeks before the big race, in fact. So now people are rushing to get a setup done, and with it being a new car, are there elements that might be fixed? Are we going to see a small change that might change our setups prior to the big race, and if you put a lot of time in, that might rub you the wrong way. Now, right now, one thing I've seen about the car that I'm a little in question is I see a little bit of floating wheels going on, and that's something I'm sure they can fix at a later date. Will it be done before the race? And more importantly, will there be other changes again that are going to affect the driving experience or the time you've put into preparing for the race? And then others, even to an extent, feel like they're being forced into purchasing the car just to run in the virtual Indy 500. So I guess the big question is this: is it worth it to buy a car to use it in a very important race? The virtual 500, over 1,000 people will be running in this race. This is a big deal. It's worth buying a car, in my opinion, to run in just this race. But then it's going to sit in your garage waiting till next season, 9-10 weeks from now. And that's a long wait on something you just purchased with your own money. Now, one more thing before I go. You might have noticed on our Facebook page, I've been posting a lot of the Simpit paint schemes that people have been submitting. I love seeing them. We've got quite an album growing already. Now, for this month, well, at least for the next couple of weeks, I want to see your Indy 500 paint schemes. I want to see what you've got regardless of sponsor. I'll put a special Indy 500 album together, and we'll put those on our Facebook as well. Just go to our Facebook page and post your pictures there, and I'll make sure to create a cool album. Maybe I'll even pick a winner at the end of the month and give away a small prize. So I hope you've enjoyed this show. This is the Simpit. I'm Sean Cole, and I'll see you on the track.